So, Happy New Year, boys.
Happy New Year, Connor.
It turns out, as per the Mayor of London, everyone's favourite poison dwarf Sadiq Khan, his New Year's announcement that London is a place for everyone. And don't I know it, with everyone coming to London in the last few years, because that's made it so much better. Like the world and its wife just turned up on my doorstep. I didn't move, but my home city looks unrecognisable. If you don't know what I'm referring to, on the 31st, then the 1st, we have the annual fireworks display that's in London every year. This time it was ticketed. You had to show your ID to turn up. But, it's always extravagant. Years before, they had the BLM fist made in the sky. They had the rainbow flag. This year, they didn't have any particularly political fireworks displays. They had some political messages, which was very, very cringeworthy. So Sadiq Khan gave a address. They had Bella Ramsey, the they, them from The Last of Us, the one that plays Ellie, the one with the big forehead.
Don't know.
They had
British?
Yeah.
Huh.
They had Joanna Lumley, who's become a climate nut in the last few years. They had Stephen Fry, who did his alternative Christmas message about being gay and Jewish. They had George the Poet, who's the black fella who's like the regime's endorsed BAME bard, I suppose. So they all delivered messages during the display. So that was the sort of drivel you'd expect. And then the whole thing sounded off with fire and fury like you're in Palestine. Paul Embry summed it quite up as well. He's a Labour guy, but he goes on GB News a fair bit. And if Labour have lost this guy, then they really have jumped the shark. But he said, London's New Year fireworks, voice over the King preaching about diversity, an homage to the NHS, an advert for same-sex marriage, then a Windrush tribute, all literally within 2 minutes of the clock striking midnight. This stuff is like a nervous tick. They can't not just do the current thing. So, yeah. And there are people predictably annoyed about it. Everything's political these days. There's nothing. It's either the politics of normalcy or the politics of weird, degenerate people that need every aspect of their life affirmed by every piece of messaging that the government puts out, including the New Year's fireworks display. But I wanted to hone in on the fact that London is a place for everyone. And that hasn't made it a particularly good place to live. I've grown up here all my life. My family are from East London, and they got pushed out to sort of the border of Kent and Kidbrooke Estates and Eltham and Bexley and the like. And so I've always journeyed in. And the worst I could remember from my youth was the 2011 London riots. They were right up my road. It was properly scary when I was like 11, 12. Since then, London's got even more inhospitable. Everything's covered in rubbish. The trains are always packed. Everything's expensive. Nothing's open. The pubs shut at like 11 in the capital city of the UK. They stop serving at about 11 o'clock. And I know that's a petty gripe, but the whole town's dying on its feet ever since the pandemic, or lockdown, I should say, because that was a political choice. So I just wanted to zoom in on a few things that are going wrong with London. First of all, TfL. So London's transport, which used to be kind of world-renowned, particularly the tube system that Victorians built, it's going bankrupt. This was on Tuesday, so this was the week of the 18th of December. This is Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, equally useless because he's in the Conservative government. But he said that the transport body, TfL, will be getting £250 million payout so it would cover the costs of London Underground upgrades. These upgrades include finally adding phone signal to various tube lines, even though it was promised last year and now won't be till 2026 because we're a third world country.
There is no way that the TfL should. You've got a captive audience of whatever it is, millions of people who use it every day.
Yep.
If that was privately owned business, it would be paying hundreds of millions, if not billions, in taxes every year.
Well, even the state partnership, private-public partnerships, or the state-owned firms in other European countries are doing way better because there's a chart right there. London's single-ticket fare is the most in Europe. Now, that's because of population density, no doubt, but it shouldn't be running at a deficit for that. We can just have competently funded transport systems.
Do you use the tube? Because I've got to say,
constantly.
When I lived in London, I kind of just switched over to buses, just learned the bus routes, and it's better.
Even the app doesn't work now. Bus tracker just doesn't work for some reason. Just stopped working in the last year. Never reliable. Always late. Still, the fares are going up. They're going up 5%. The rail fares in March, even though they're permanently on strike. Tubes don't run past 11. Most of the lines.
Yes.
So if you're out at London in the night, good luck getting home. Call an Uber driver and get salted, I guess. Painfully rubbish. It's paid more than $6 billion to TfL, Department for Transport, in 7 different payments since May 2020. So over the course of lockdown, where it's barely being used, it was still running at a deficit. And so they paid $6 billion to TfL. Now, Sadiq Khan this 250 million payment is only half of what he was actually getting because he requested 500 million. Where's all the money going? It's just evaporating to thin air. So fewer services aren't getting their upgrades on time. There are more people using them. So yeah, there's more demand, but technically they should be covering costs if people are paying appropriate fares. And yet it's just a bottomless pit of finances. So thanks for the mismanagement, Sadiq. Cheers. Thanks very much. I wonder why. Maybe it's because the supply is never enough to fit demand. Because any time that I see a black hole in finances, I mean, you're the economist, Dan, so you can tell me if I'm right. If the money keeps going up, but it never seems to be enough, I always just look at if there's a demand side problem, right? And I would just suggest that this is the net migration figures, because we can't never stop going about this on this channel, because it is the main problem in the UK at the moment. I'd just suggest that importing 1.2 million people last year might be a bit of an issue for things like infrastructure and housing.
And almost all of them want to live in London.
Yes.
That's the thing. When you move to a new country, most people want to go to the capital.
Yeah, because we've centralised, particularly financial service sectors, most of the economic opportunities in London. And so we've created this giant, super diverse, as Eric Kaufman would say, cosmopolis, and have just stacked people endlessly on top of each other and think that we won't have infrastructure challenges and cultural incompatibility.
Yeah, you don't get it, though, because you do get a salary bonus for working in London, but all of that bonus is captured by landlords.
Yeah, it's swallowed up by rent, particularly, which is really, really pricey, and commuting. I mean, the amount of money that I spend on trains every month.
So all those people moving to London, finishing their degree and moving to London and getting what they think is a good job, the only reason they're doing it is because they hope that 15 years down the line they'll be in like a director position when it will finally pay off. But if you don't make it to that level, you're better off basically just living elsewhere in the country and just getting a normal job.
Well, this is the thing. So if you just stay in the corporate ladder, you're hoping that you have an earnings jump that allows you to dislocate from living inside the commuter belt and paying rent forever. But it's not like throughout your 20s you're working and saving to then pay for something. You're essentially working from 20 to 30 and then hoping that at 31...
Well, at least when I first moved to London, you could do that. You could work and save, but it's just been eroded, that difference.
Yeah, and this is why I don't rent in Swindon, because I would never actually be able to save up enough money to buy a house and then not live in Swindon. This is why I commute.
And also be living in Swindon.
Trains. But yeah, Swindon is a hellhole.
Yes,
but that's also because of mass migration. This is the Londonification of everything, and not everywhere in London as well, because there are plenty of areas in London that are still more tolerable than Swindon, but they're getting gradually worse because of immigration. Like my local high street, no tube line, relatively disconnected from most of London. You lived in Bromley, I live in Bexley.
Yes.
They're quite similar.
Yes.
Pakistani vape shop, Polish shop,
yes.
The outposts of global homogenization moving in. So the only constant in the high street is now your average coffee chain that all serve the same thing at relatively overpriced rates. Everywhere looks the same. It's miserable. And it's like, okay, high street footfall is down. Inflation is massively up. And the only businesses that are being opened are these Technicolor shops that seem to do cash only. I wonder if someone's on the take there.
I did notice before I moved to Bromley that the Guardian had run a report on the least. They were naming and shaming the least diverse areas of London, and I remember reading that, and then whatever reason I ended up moving there afterwards. Anyway, but least diverse for London is not actually saying that much. So I mean, what finally triggered it for me in the end was a 13-year-old girl a couple of streets down from me who ended up experiencing an enrichment event. And then I was looking at my kids, looking at this place and thinking, yeah, I'm off. I'm going.
Well, so in the last census, which you're an aficionado of, it was about 80% British born, because I don't think they broke it down by white British as far as I remember, but so 20% of Bromley is foreign born.
Right.
That's about as good as you're going to get for a London borough.
Yes.
Yes. Fantastic. All right. Where are they all living? Well, it turns out it's at our expense. So Matthew Goodwin did a really good breakdown of this, because he went on GB News a little while ago and he said about 50% of social housing in London is occupied by foreigners. And they went, aha, fact check, false. It's only 48. It's like, right. Why does any person that showed up on our doorstep yesterday get a house at my expense? Why does any foreigner have a taxpayer-funded house?
Why isn't it zero?
Yeah, it should be complete zero, but it isn't. And of course, this means that the national population in London, in one of the most expensive places to live in the world, really, are just being treated as.
And it's just
cattle farms.
weird that it's considered a radical thing to say that it should be zero.
Yep.
You go to any other country. I mean, just move to Cambodia or
Demand a house.
Yes, or Brazil, and just say, look, I'm foreign. Give me a house.
Or any other time period in history.
Yes,
This is an eyelash thin epoch in civilization, and we suddenly treat it as if these people that have arrived from anywhere are entitled to housing and
they've managed to move the oven to the window that far.
And also, for the people that have actually fought in the armed forces and defended our country, they're fine to live on the street without any provisions, not even occupying the army barracks that are now being filled up with foreign migrants. So the people that actually care enough about the country don't get housing provisions, but Tom, Dick, and Abdul, yep, fine,
Yes.
it's all right. We'll house those. So, if you want to look at the consequences of this, if you think that this isn't bad enough, things can only get better, as the Dark Lord once said. It turns out it can only get worse. So, I did this interview recently with Philip Pilkington and Paul Morland, who are the authors of an ARC report called the Demographic Trilemma. You should really speak to Philip at some point. He's a fantastic economist, and they ran the numbers and they said, okay, if we keep up these elements of the trilemma, it was egoism, which means small families, careers, personal freedom. Economic dynamism, so keep the GDP going up. Never mind GDP per capita, because our elites don't really care about that. And if we wanted low immigration, you can only have two of those sides. So Britain's chosen economic dynamism and egoism, so they've turned the immigration tap on. And if we keep that trend up, sub-replacement birth rates, really high immigration, aging population, by 2083, we're going to be 54% first-generation immigrant.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, that trilemma, actually.
Yeah, they modelled Japan, Israel, and the UK all together. And Israel looks the most desirable one because they have low immigration, high birth
Japan's
rates.
going to be significantly better than us as well.
It is significantly better than us on GDP per capita, but we did go into the reasons of why that's not particularly sustainable. And now you have the Japanese government saying we need high immigration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I better watch that then. I haven't seen that yet.
Yep. Fantastic. So go and watch it on the website. It's free.
Yeah.
So we like free things over here, but we do appreciate if you subscribe so we can keep bringing these guests in because, of course, trains cost money. See my earlier rant. Anyway, so I just thought we'd go on to crime because it's not like these people show up and are all brilliant economic contributors. They're not all doctors, lawyers, and engineers, despite what we're told. So I've brought up this statistic before that the UK is number one in Europe, Western Europe, for crimes committed by foreigners. And I think it's number 4 overall if you count Eastern Europe as well. In the world, it's something like 14th. And most people go, well, where's that stat from? It turns out it's from the US Department of Justice. So if I just hover over the UK here, right? So that's his criminality score. So that's 61st out of 193 and second of all 11 countries in Western Europe. But you change the indicator on this for our audio viewers. You put foreign actors. Let's hover over the UK, shall we? Oh, number 1 in all of Western Europe for crimes committed by foreigners. Second of 44 countries in Europe, 18th in the world. It's almost like this is a totally avoidable problem that we wouldn't have to import. It's almost like London being a place for everyone has some adverse consequences that we don't have to deal with.
Well, why?
I check out something.
Please do.
Just want to see Poland real quick. 16th out of 17 of Central and Eastern European countries.
169th in the world.
41 out of 44 countries in Europe.
And what's Poland's immigration rate like?
I love zeros, but...
okay. Right. I wonder if there's some sort of correlation.
So why isn't the magic soil in the UK working then?
Because I think at some point, the border force must have turned off the portal technology that converts every backward savage from the third world who hate us into a really productive and patriotic citizen just by giving them a passport.
Because like 1950s Britain was remarkably low crime. In fact, the small handful of criminals like the Krays or whoever became very, very famous just because it was such an unusual thing. You know,
and it was concentrated in certain areas in certain cities.
But we were told that we could just basically ship in chaps from sub-Saharan Africa, and the moment their feet touch the soil, they would basically become exactly like us.
Yeah, it turns out that people are actually just not economic integers that you can register on a balance sheet.
Shocking.
They have cultural prejudices and different religious convictions, and actually they don't see themselves as your neighbours. They don't see you as their countrymen. Sometimes they just see you as people who are occupying land and that have money that they want, and they can just take it, either through the government's means of redistribution or just by force. See crime. Not fun. Now, this is pretty evident. It's so evident at this point that even Sky News kind of got pretty sick of Sadiq Khan. So they did an interview with him. And the host, Mark Austin, just said, okay, it's all well and good for you saying that the new year brings new and good things, but what about knife crime and gun crime? Because they've been going up exponentially, and we'll get onto some stats on that in a minute. So if even Sky News, who I'm not a fan of, as many may know, are asking Sadiq Khan this question, it seems that the narrative can't quite deny reality strong enough. Do you know what Sadiq Khan's response to this was?
I don't care.
No. He said, we're going to crack down on the mobile phone companies. So, his rationale is that crime only exists because people have mobile phones that other people want. So, therefore, they're going to crack down on the mobile phone market.
I'm pretty sure, isn't Sky News owned by Comcast? Because that's a really weird response.
No, it's not Sky News' fault. It's Sadiq Khan said that.
No, that's my point. Like, why would he respond with that? Unless he's threatening Sky and their owners?
No, I think it's genuinely...
Unless he's genuinely retarded?
He is. So the mentality is, this is like when Lenin would appoint a bunch of thieves and murderers as the guards in the gulags because they weren't the ones corrupted by the capitalist civilization, right? His point is, if you, as a law-abiding citizen, have a thing that the migrants want, it's because they were deprived of it by living somewhere else. And as soon as they come over here, you're provoking them by showing your affluence to them. So all we need to do is redistribute the means of phone ownership, and then there'll be no crime. So it's actually your fault for being peaceful and productive.
So basically, I get taxed for having a phone so that somebody who's just been shipped in from sub-Saharan Africa can have a phone.
But they've all got phones. Like, you see
That's
them
true.
get off the boats with their smartphones.
Well, not just that.
Yeah.
Migration Watch has already shown in prior research that the government actually gives these asylum seekers free phones so they can contact their family. So, might be a small flaw in Sadiq Khan's plan.
However, the bit where they tax me for having a phone, that bit will probably be valid.
Probably. Yeah.
It's just
like taxing you for having a car to get around and actually go to your job.
Yes.
Except the London Underground has a way higher pollution rate than any vehicle driven inside the M25.
Right.
It's not meant to make sense.
Yes.
It's meant to stigmatize law-abiding people so they can get their actual goal of importing infinity immigrants, which are going to vote for Sadiq Khan eventually, which is the only reason why, despite being very unpopular, he's probably going to get in again.
Sorry to interrupt the video, but I thought I'd announce that we have a new line of merch. This is our aesthetics collection. So I was thinking that in the face of AI art debasing the very concept of art, actually we'd do something quite positive. So we commissioned a series of paintings that were actually really beautiful and could be something that we could present outside of politics. So for example, we have this magnificent painting of a ship weathering a storm, which I thought was just really nice. And we have, of course, a glorious, sort of surrealist, giant white tiger drinking from a lake. But also there are other things that are just kind of interesting, such as the chap lost in cyberspace, or something that I thought might, in time for Christmas, make a great present for your mum or something like that. A beautiful cat lounging on some clouds. Basically, we wanted to do some stuff that wasn't just political, so things that were just nice and beautiful and interesting, because that's also a part of the world we want to curate. So you can go over to shop.lotuses.com. Buying the merch is a really great way of supporting us and means that we can live past demonetization. And I'm sure they make great gifts for the folks as well.
So I did speak about the crime stats. The Telegraph spoke to an undercover police officer here, and they did compile some of the crime stats. This was on Christmas Day. What a Christmas present for all Londoners. So in the last year, this is from July 2022 to 2023, there were 43, and this went up to 45 by New Year's Day, knife crime incidents reported to, 43 per day. Knife crime incidents reported to the police in London every day. The shootings are up 6% since 2022. There were 90 homicides in the last year, 20 of the dead being in their teens. That'd be 21 now, in a case we'll get onto in a moment. Quote, one frontline officer who spoke on the condition of anonymity said the level of violence on the streets was the worst he'd experienced in the last 2 decades. It really does feel like things are getting out of control, he said. The volume and ferocity of the violence that we're seeing is off the charts. I've been on the job for almost 25 years, and I've never known it be as bad as this. Drill music and the use of social media have made things so much worse. You have online squabbles that escalate so quickly into violence. Now, true, sure, London riots are organised via BlackBerry Messenger. But I can't help but feel like if law-abiding people use social media and it doesn't result in rampant crime in other areas, it might be a problem of demographics and cultural values more than Twitter.
Well, I don't think it's enough. Like, I remember when I was a little kid, you go on a school trip to somewhere and you could buy little folding knives in the gift shops, and a whole bunch of the boys would just buy these folding knives.
Oh, in Switzerland and France on the ski trip, I've heard it. Yeah,
loads of boys would have one. And we didn't go around stabbing each other.
Yes.
Whereas for now, for some reason, there's something different about the demographics, which is resulting in lots and lots and lots of stabbing.
Yeah, and it's funny how, according to that map we just brought up, it seems to be disproportionately concentrated in people that just showed up yesterday. So migration goes up, crime by migrants goes up, crime in London goes up. Must be the mobile phones. Got it.
Yes.
Understood. So speaking of these stabbings, we had one on New Year's Eve. So some families just lost their son. This was in Primrose Hill, in the park in Camden. The Met Police have put out a witness appeal for anyone that has witnessed the stabbing. They've arrested a man on the suspicion of murder.
And this is why I moved out of London. It's because economically it would have been far better for me, but you just look at your kids, you think I'm just not doing this.
Yeah, well, this was the kid in question.
Yeah.
Apparently, he was involved in an altercation just at Primrose Hill. So it doesn't seem like he was part of a gang, just 16-year-old kid, Henry Pittman.
Oh, he probably got harassed while he was walking home.
Yeah, it was, apparently it was on an overlook point because Primrose Hill, since lockdown, has become a major party scene of where gangs of youths just show up and have a drink and do whatnot.
Do we know anything about the person that stabbed him to death? Because I did happen to notice that you said that they've arrested a man.
It just says a male.
A man.
A nondescript male.
Another man, is it loose?
Yes.
No.
We're going to be seeing a lot of euphemisms throughout this.
When they don't give you a description, that's a description.
Yeah.
Yes. Just translate to scholar, I think. So he's the 22nd teenager now to be murdered in London, 2023, 18 of whom were stabbed. So they're not very creative in their methods of ending people's lives, are they? More than 100,000 people had gathered on the banks of the Thames in central London on the 31st to see the midnight firework display. And the Met said 23 people were arrested there for offences including sexual assault, theft, and assault of emergency workers. 2 other stabbings happened at the same time. A man in his 20s was found with a stab wound in Teddington in southwest London. And earlier in the day, a man was stabbed near Plumstead Station in Greenwich. So that's not that far from me. So just a part and parcel of living in a big city, I suppose, as I believe Sadiq Khan himself.
And just going back to my situation, I mean, I abandoned the capital because I felt I had to. But why are we in the situation where we have to abandon our capital?
Well, because of people like this. So this crime happened in 2020, and as now the sentencing happened late 2023. A depraved man. Just a depraved man. Should we have a look at the depraved man?
Depraved men could be here, he thought. I hate depraved men.
Quite. It really is the Jimmy Dore meme, isn't it? He raped a woman as she was asleep on the Piccadilly line in front of the passengers. An 11-year-old son and a French tourist witnessed this, likely traumatized. About 3 hours before, he had chased 2 women into their house because he was pleasuring himself looking through their window.
And you notice that they say, did it in front of other passengers. I mean, presumably there was no one there who felt that they could step in.
Well, because you get a Daniel Penny situation of where
exactly.
And I'm not condoning it.
But even think of that. I mean, let's say you're a rapist. You don't do it in front of other people. You would have thought this comes back to the whole Palestine thing and then the Holocaust. It's like the Germans tried to cover up killing the Jews, whereas the guys in Gaza are just like, hey, we're proud of it. A rapist that's proud of doing it in front of the public instead of trying to hide their crimes is another level of criminality.
Yeah. I mean,
the criminal mindset is so beyond the normal.
It is a little bit like the Norm Macdonald joke about Bill Cosby, where someone said, "Oh, Bill Cosby, I can't believe it. The hypocrisy. He was there the whole time saying that black men should pull their pants up, and he was going around pulling his down." And Norm goes, "Yeah, well, I don't think the worst part about it is the hypocrisy. I think the worst part is the raping." But you do make a good point in that, and this you will see something very shortly. And this is why I say they genuinely don't consider you human or their countrymen or their neighbors, is because their impulse control is so low and their frame of reference is so savage. They are solipsistic in that they believe that no other human being has equivalent moral worth or deserves consideration to them. It's just they will do whatever they can get away with or whatever they feels right in the instance. And a lot of that time, it's just robbing you, stabbing you, and raping you. I mean, putting it sadly and bluntly, he was...
Let's import another 1.2 million and see if that fixes it.
Yeah, well, he was jailed for 9 years. But it seems there's no shortage of guys like this. Now, bear in mind, this article does not say whether he's a first or second generation immigrant.
Can I just quickly point out? So he was jailed for 9 years, right?
Yeah.
There was a guy a few years ago who set up cameras in his bedroom to film women that he was having consensual sex with, and he got 12 years.
I mean, if you want to be even more miserable, there was a case in Germany recently where a girl was gang raped by 10 men. Only one of the men faced prison time, I think it was a few months, and the lawyer argued that the trauma of their immigrant experience and their high testosterone levels meant that they just had to rape her.
I mean,
And that was a plausible defense.
Could you see our governments are at war with us? They are trying to exterminate us.
Yeah, great fun. So this is exactly who you're being taxed to import. This was drawn my attention to. I mean, if this was a dark comedy skit, you couldn't have written it any better. This is Ross Kemp, who goes to all sorts of places. I mean, he spent time with the Taliban. I don't know what kind of crazy person would want to do that. But he decided to speak to this group of South Africans, and they genuinely cannot formulate an understanding that a rape victim would have trauma. So all the consequences of rape are relative to whether or not it would inconvenience them or they would be caught. And I want to play this because these are the kinds of people we're importing from the third world. And this is the mindset that we're importing to work in care homes or to fill the NHS backlog or to just stick them in an asylum centre so that more money changes hands. I'm just going to play this out loud. Apologies.
Guys, let's go.
Some of them, they're not screaming. It's like they wanted to be raped, you see. She also grabs you see, no
It's
more
like
crying.
she's enjoying it, you know,
see.
even though she isn't, but it's like she's enjoying it.
Do you think it's right? Do you think it's right to rape?
Yeah, it's wrong. Yeah, it's wrong.
What about the consequences of what you're doing in terms of how that affects the
Exactly.
person that's raped?
Yeah, the consequences, we look at that all the time, you know, because it happens, she might scream, you know, people might wake up. A lot of people, especially.
I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about the emotional effect, the physical effect it has on the
Yeah,
girl.
yeah. Sometimes we know that we might rape her and wake up tomorrow with viruses ourselves, like HIV, you know.
What about regretting what you've done to the girl?
I also do regret about it because if she fell pregnant, what will be that baby's father? Who will be that baby's father?
But what about her personal feelings?
Doesn't go in. I mean, this is why I brought up the fact that the guy raping a woman in front of us on the tube. That's not a small difference. That's a huge difference. Because when you come to actually sentencing someone or putting someone behind bars, one of the things you have to consider is mens rea.
Mhm.
Did they have the intent to commit the crime? And if they did, then it's obviously worse because it's like, okay, you thought about it and then you committed it. If the person cannot comprehend what they're doing can damage other people and they can't even comprehend why it's wrong, or in the case of the guy who raped on the tube, can't even comprehend that maybe you should try and hide your crimes, I kind of think you should go as far as you can with the law. I mean, death penalty, because what do you do with an animal that can't comprehend that it eating toddlers is something bad? I mean, you can't teach it that.
Well, there was potentially a step before that, which is not welcome them into the country in the first place and then deal with the problem.
Of course, but when you're dealing with a criminal who can't even comprehend that what he's doing is wrong, which is why he doesn't hide it, and can't even get into the mind of the woman he's raping and think that she might not be, happy about the situation, you're not dealing with someone who is rational or part of the court system at that point. That is an animal.
There are no amount of pool tables that will solve this problem. It's not a social problem. These people just do not have the cognitive capacity or cultural instruction to consider you their neighbors or equal moral agents. They will just take what they want from you when they want it and only be discouraged if they think it has personal consequences to them, which is why you either need to hang the death penalty over their head because they cannot be reasoned with, or just never bring them here in the first place. But these are your future neighbors. No, sorry. These are your future tenants because you will be taxed to put these people up in a very nice place in London that you could otherwise not have afforded because they showed up yesterday and demanded social housing.
And as I mentioned there, the overwhelming priority of all Western governments is to import as many of these people as they possibly can.
Yeah.
The one priority that
Because
the UK government has.
The Treasury Green Book says at least 200,000 people have to be flooded into the country every year to maintain the pension system, and therefore it doesn't matter who those people are. It matters to us, whose loved ones might be assaulted. I actually had an ex-girlfriend who was groped in the middle of the night by a foreign national, Bulgarian guy, here illegally, had multiple offences against his name, and he had held in prison for about 2 years and had his deportation notice served to him in 2022. But all of that costs us money. Even just to kick them out of the country in the first place, we've got to be taxed to pay for the bloody jet fuel. Why are you here? Why are you here? Other than just economic reasons. Ugh. Just another one. Race riots are now just a permanent fixture of London as well, thanks to Sadiq Khan. Really feeling the diversity and enrichment. These are the Eritreans. So this is outside the Eritrean embassy. They're on Camberwell Road. This has happened a few times now, but this was just on New Year's. They are apparently protesting dictator President Isaias Afenwerki. 8 were arrested at this demonstration.
But which side do you side with? Because if you don't side with the right side, you're on the wrong side of history.
Yes. I have the controversial far-right opinion that I should not have to care about random African dictatorship because random men in balaclavas with sticks should not be hitting my police officers. And again, as well, this comes down to the point that you made, right? They do not consider themselves anything beyond impulse now. They don't consider themselves our neighbours. I would not dream if I went to another country of raising my particular political issues in the street, but also even if I were petitioning the country that I was living in at the behest of its occupants to intervene in my country of origin because I was a refugee, why would I think the most compelling way to get that message across is to attack police officers with sticks? Like I'm the Zulu.
Yes.
Like, what? I can't actually wrap my head around this level of barbarian illogic. Though I will say that the guy that recorded this from his flat, he said, I've muted the post, but restricting comments because it's a cesspit. Eritreans were protesting against their own government. Apparently, there were officials inside, and that's why it turned violent. Anything else about gang wars is nonsense to fit agendas. Right, don't notice patterns about violent criminality via certain ethnicities and cultures, because that's racist. I'm sorry, I'm less concerned at this point about being called racist, because 1, I'm not. 2, this should not be happening in my home city. No, London should not be a place for violent Africans who want to hit police officers with sticks. Suppose that's far right. There's another angle of it, of just the reasonless, senseless violence, but I suppose...
And that's our capital city now.
Yeah. Do you know what the response from the police was about this? So this is the former investigating officer of the Met Police, and he said, well, you've got loads of people standing around filming things on their phones. If you want to help out, stop filming things on your phones and go join the Met.
Bro, who's holding the phones? It's the same guy holding the sticks. We can see in the footage the guys holding the phones are the ones holding the sticks.
But also the guy who was living above the road, filming it from his house, who said, I just wanted to go to the corner shop. Who
For
said,
the glory of England, go and protect the police of vice and virtue.
But okay, let's say average British man picked up a stick and went down to the street and tried to defend his own doorstep. What happens? Oh, he's the one that gets arrested. And if you join the police, you're told to stand back and stand by and do nothing because we wouldn't want to upset the rapey, violent foreigners, but we do want to stop the so-called far-right football
and the idea
that
that the police are in any way working on behalf of the British people is laughable.
Yeah, there was literally the veterans lining up ahead of the Cenotaph procession who were leaning their flags against the metal railings, and they were told to lift their flags off the railings and not stand near there. And he said, well, you're not telling the Palestinian protesters to go and stop waving their flags and sticking them in front of everywhere, are you? And the police officer went, I'm sorry, mate, there are more of us than there are of them. I mean, the police are cowards. Frankly, cowards.
And also, I mean, I've mentioned this in segments before, but I'll just reiterate it again. And we know this from published government documents, but the highest policing priority is going after what they call the far right.
Yes.
So white British people, that's their highest policing priority because apparently those guys are causing violence and mayhem everywhere.
Well, that was in the prevent training. It was the prevent training were unilaterally focusing on far-right terrorism at the expense of focusing on Islamism, despite the fact that we've had now multiple people come across the channel in dinghies and claim refugee status and then bomb pop concerts or attempt to bomb hospitals in cabs or stab gay people in Reading.
So if you make a spicy comment on Twitter, you know, the police have no end of resources available to confront that.
Yep.
But if you're, attacking them with sticks in the middle of London, well, they've got a very limited budget to deal with that bit.
Yeah. And even if you don't attack them, even if you just stand in the street and assert the fact that you're a Londoner and you are entitled to live here because you have no other home to go to, you will still have abuse hurled at you by people in masks from everywhere and anywhere that thinks London is for them.
Well, there was that guy, wasn't there, who basically all his video. No, well, not him, but that's a good one. There was another guy who basically just filmed himself walking down the street and said, why is there so many foreign flags here? And for that, he got arrested.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, that was Bethnal Green High Street.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
now this one is solid because he's just like, no, I'm not going to get pushed around.
Yeah, well, this is slightly old video, and I'll play a little bit of it. Apologies for the language warning. If there are kids in the room, you might want to mute it for a moment. But this is just average Cockney lad who is standing in a street in the middle of London, and a bunch of foreigners with Jafaican and the sort of Bradford accent you'd hear in Four Lions, are shouting at him, calling him Australian, because they genuinely don't recognise a latent native London accent, because they think, as Sadiq Khan is telling them, London is for everyone, except the Londoners. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this.
Enjoy your fucking night.
Why don't you go back to where you came from, eh? Leave these fellas alone, they got work to do.
Who you fucking
Fuck, I'm talking to
You're
you.
fucking bullshit.
I'm talking
The
to you.
biggest shit in the world.
No, not bullshit, mate. No, others know.
Yeah.
Why don't you fuck off?
Oh, let's go, man. I wanna talk to you.
Go back to where you came from,
You give me
Abdul.
a laugh because I fucking come here.
London, mate, London.
Of course.
Fucking London. Anglo-Saxon English.
Fuck the London.
So fuck off back to where you came from.
I'm just going to mute it and let it roll, because later on, so he actually puts his hands on him at one point and says, have a fight with me. But as he puts his hands on him, the police just disappear. Just disappear. As this one guy is getting ganged up on by guys in masks, shouting verbal abuse at him, and pushing him about. They're accusing him of hitting them, and he doesn't. Police vanish. And that is emblematic of how you will be treated as a native Londoner, displaced from your own homeland, forced to pay for foreign invaders who commit crimes at disproportionate rates, and then right from the top in the fireworks display that you extorted to pay for, presented to you by the Mayor of London, no, by tax-paying Londoners, you will be told that it's for everyone except for you. So, Happy New Year, everyone. Capital City's gone to hell.
And of course, the other thing is he's Gen X. So, I mean, he's about the last generation that had this sort of British identity in them from a young age. Everything after that, you've been indoctrinated so heavily in the schools and the education and the media system that you basically just got to surrender to the world. So, yeah, it's on its way out.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Symposium series, this episode on Antigone. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.